So, good afternoon, good evening, depending on the time zone you may be. So, today we'll be looking at this particular question from Quora, which says, how do you use Docker as a VM? How do you use Docker as a VM? So, yes, we know Docker as a containerization tool, and we use it in making applications stand alone in such a way that even if you want to maybe destroy such application, then you don't need to destroy the whole of the server. Or if there is maybe an issue or maybe a challenge with that particular server that actually hosts that application, you don't need to destroy the main server itself. Rather, you just need to destroy this, just like a subset of the server which is within the server. Actually, I'll discuss all this. I'll explain better because that is what this question is actually talking about. How do you use Docker as a virtual machine? We also have a similar question over here, which says, okay, not this question. Let me go back. Um, okay, I can't find the question over here. I can't find it, but it's a similar question to this. So let's see how we can find a lasting approach to this challenge. How to use Docker as a VM. So over here in my AWS, I have two instances running. I have two servers running currently. Um, one of them is the Docker server. So the Docker server I provisioned, I have already installed Docker in it. And we have the virtual server. There's nothing in it. All what I just had to do was just to provision the server without adding anything to it. So first of all, let me go to the Docker server. So the reason why I'm creating these two servers is because I want to actually show you that the same way you can provision a server, a standalone server in a Docker, rather in a server. What am I saying now? Okay, sorry. The same way you can provision a server inside, that is a Docker server, inside a main server, and then put applications into it. That is the same way that you can also use in provisioning applications and packages in a normal server. So let me go straight to what we have. Let me go to the Docker server, connect. Right? So let me exit this. Okay, clear. Right. So over here, I need to authenticate to my Docker server. This is it. And let me clear this. Let me do Docker PS. Okay, I have to get root access, clear. So I can do my Docker PS. So as you can see, it's a fresh Docker server. So let's go to Docker images, and you can see we have only one images, which is the default images that comes when you install Docker. So the first thing we have to do right now is that we have to create an image on Docker. So we'll be choosing Nginx as the image we will be using. So in order for us to pull Nginx, it means that we have to pull it from a Docker hub. So we will be typing or searching for Nginx, or let me just go to Docker hub. Docker hub. Then I'll be going to their main site. Yeah. Then I'll be so Nginx is actually a web server and can use it as a reverse proxy server. So this is Nginx over here. In order for us to have it as an image um, in our server, we have to use this Docker pull Nginx. So we'll be copying that, going to our main server, and then doing docker pull nginx, and then it pulls everything into our server. So as you can see, downloaded newer image for Nginx latest. So if we go to Docker images, right? This Docker images. So as you can see, we have Nginx over here. So we have to run the container. And in order for us to do that, we can do this. Um, let's go to the documentation downwards. So we can actually run this. We can run this, but we won't be using this because I would like to expose a port. So we will be taking this as our example. So since we'll be exposing a port, using that, we'll be pasting over here. Then remove this, right? Then the name of my image is Nginx, and the tag is latest. But if you don't want to add the tag, you can just leave it as Nginx. Then this is the port I'll be using 8080 to 80 because the default port for Nginx is 80, and we'll be exposing that. Then will be naming we'll be naming our container Nginx container, right? So I'm also going to be adding a volume to it and checking the documentation. I should be able to find the volume. Yeah. So this is where volume will be. Yeah, this is the volume. Copy, and then we'll be pasting over here. So I think it's quite good enough. Docker run the name Nginx container with the volume as is, detached with a port of 8080 mapped to, of course, internal port of 80 with Nginx, and then we use enter to run, right? So our container has been created. So let's do Docker PS. And as you can see, we have what Nginx as an image running on this particular container ID. So this that was created is also a container ID, and that is what you can see over here. So we have the ports. Remember, we use 8080 and then 82, of course, the default port, but this is one that will be exposing the external port. This is what we'll be exposing, and then the name of our Nginx container. So if you remember the question, let me go back. So you remember the question, I said, how do you use Docker as a VM? So there's actually a line of code to do that. When you want to enter into a Docker container. And let me go back to my terminal. And the code is this. You have to use Docker exec -it. Then you get either the container ID or the name, and then /bin/bash. So when you enter, as you can see, root at, now look at this. Now you can see this is the Docker container ID, taking the place of what? Of an IP, you know. As you can look at it over here, let me go to this. As you can see over here, you can see my mouse. You can see the IP is what? 172.3.1.9113. So this was actually the IP, you know, but right now it has changed. So this is a server, root at container name, just as this was the former server, root at IP 172. So currently we have, let me clear this so you can see better. So currently, if you do ls, you can see the same things you will find in a server is what you can find here. So with this, we've been able to use Docker as a VM or as a server. So if you feel okay, fine, it has not done enough, maybe you have not you don't have what it takes to run a particular package in it, then you can simply destroy it. And when you do, your main server will still stand. So let's do something. Let's do something over here right now. You can do sudo update. You can still run, okay, on Docker. That is another thing we must know. On Docker, you don't use sudo. On Docker, so what you have to do is just use apt update, and then it updates. And maybe you want to install Nano. You can do apt install Nano, and it will download Nano. So right about now, it's doing the same thing that it should do on a normal server, and yet we are in a Docker server. So the Docker server, or rather, we are in a Docker container. So the Docker container right now is acting as a VM or acting as a virtual machine or acting as a remote server. So let's also do some things. Let's exit and go back to the main server. So we are in the main server currently, clear. Now let's do Docker PS, right? So let's go into this port and let's see our Nginx work. So um, I have an IP of the 3.9. I'll just copying that, pasting it. Then remember our port is what, 8080. You go into it, and then let's see what it gives to us. Coffee break, coffee break, coffee break. Oh, the network is quite bad. Home cannot be reached. Now, do you know why it cannot be reached? That is because we have not exposed 8080 on AWS. If you are using your Linode, a Linode server, you don't need, or a digital ocean, you don't need to expose the port. But for AWS, you have to expose the port. So we will be going to our instance. This is our Docker server. And then we'll be going to our security, then going here, and then we'll be editing inbound rules. We'll be adding a rule, custom TCP 8080, 8080, custom, we want it anywhere and everywhere, and then save rules. The canceling this right about now, we have it open. So we have 8080 as one of the ports that is recognized by AWS. So we can try it once more. 403 forbidden. However, Nginx is in it. So what actually happened here is that volume is not the volume is not correct. So you have to um work on it. However, what I want to achieve is this: to expose Nginx, you know, to expose Nginx to that particular port, which it recognizes it. This is not an issue at all. It can be troubleshooted at any time. So for the second server, this will actually be a quick one. For the second server, which is the main server, virtual server. Let's connect SSH. Let's connect to, this time I'll be using a Git bash. So, no, it won't recognize it. Let me go into my desktop, ls cd, or maybe downloads. I also have it in downloads, the same key pair. Let me clear. Then I'll be using it once again. Okay, fine, we are in it. So the first thing you have to do is a sudo apt update. Okay, then a sudo apt update. So after updating, the next thing we'll run is having to install our Nginx. So we'll do sudo apt install Nginx. Nginx -y. Right. Okay, good. So if we do sudo, maybe we want to check for it, the version of Nginx, let's do Nginx version. Okay, operation. Okay, so what we are meant to use is Nginx hyphen capital V. So as you can see, Nginx version is what? Is 1.18.0. And then if we try to have access to it on the web, so we'll use local host IP with a port of, okay, we don't need a port. If you do port 80, it will still bring the same thing because that's the default port of Nginx. So as you can see, welcome to Nginx. So this is what we are just trying to say. The same way we have provisioned Nginx on a normal server, the same way we can also provision Nginx even on Docker. So this is where we'll be stopping, and I hope I've been able to answer this question at least to a good extent. So do have a wonderful time and do subscribe to my channel to encourage me to do more. So thank you very much and have a wonderful time. So bye bye.